Hey everyone, and welcome back to Western Flavors. Before we begin our new episode, let's recap the dramatic and emotional events from our last story. The chapter was a story of two very different conversations. We saw Nathan Price, in a calculated move, ask for and receive Tim Fleming's enthusiastic blessing to propose to Amy. At the same time, we followed a disguised Ty on his secret, painstaking investigation into his own past at the Hudson Library, where he came agonizingly close, just a single page turn away from discovering his own identity. The story ended on a powerful note of dramatic irony, with Ty witnessing the handshake between Tim and Nathan from a distance, completely unaware of its devastating significance. If you missed that incredible suspenseful story, the full playlist is linked for you in the description below. If you're enjoying this new season, please take a second to hit that like button and be sure to subscribe so you never miss a chapter. Now today, Ty's investigation takes a dark turn as he uncovers a secret meeting that will change everything. The frustration of the near miss at the library was a fire in Ty's gut. For days, he had been haunted by the knowledge that the answers to his entire life were contained in a single leather-bound book, sitting on a shelf, just out of his reach. He had replayed the moment in his mind 1,000 times. The librarian's gentle but firm announcement of closing time, the soft final thud of the book as he'd placed it back on the shelf. The ghost of a name, a story, his story, had been right there, a whisper away. The two men, his father-in-law and his enemy, shaking hands on a street corner, their faces alight with a shared triumphant purpose. He didn't know what the handshake had meant, but he knew on a deep instinctual level that it was not a good thing. It was an alliance, and any alliance that included Nathan Price was a threat to the family at Heartland. These two events had solidified a new cold resolve within him. His passive academic research was over. The library was a dead end for now. If he wanted to understand the mystery of his past and the current threat to his family's future, he had to focus on the one tangible link between them, Nathan. He had to understand the man's motives, his connections, his secrets. He was no longer just a man searching for his own identity. He was an investigator. He spent the next few days in a state of intense, focused surveillance. He was a ghost in his own hometown, a shadow moving on the periphery. Dressed in his worn, anonymous clothes, a faded baseball cap pulled low over his eyes, he was completely unrecognizable. He would take the bus into Hudson each morning and would simply watch. He learned the rhythm of Nathan's life. He saw the times he would go to the feed store, the days he would meet with other local ranchers for coffee at Maggie's, the evenings he would spend at the Heartland Ranch, a welcome, charming guest, his performance of the kind, supportive friend so perfect, so utterly convincing that it made Ty's blood run cold. He was a man of impeccable routine, a pillar of the community. But Ty, watching from a distance, began to see the cracks in the facade. He saw the way Nathan's eyes would constantly, almost imperceptibly, scan his surroundings, the look of a man who was always on guard. He saw the way he would end his cheerful public conversations and retreat to his truck to make quiet, intense phone calls, his expression suddenly hard and serious. And he saw the expensive black SUVs with tinted windows that would occasionally and discreetly meet with Nathan on a quiet, rural back road, a brief exchange taking place before the vehicle would speed away towards the city. Nathan Price was not the simple, successful rancher he pretended to be. He was a man with secrets. And Ty, driven by a fierce, protective instinct he didn't even fully understand, was determined to uncover them. His opportunity came on a bright, clear afternoon, a week after his near miss at the library. He was in Hudson, watching from a bench across the street as Nathan came out of the bank. But Nathan wasn't alone. He was with two other men. They were not ranchers. They were tall, impeccably dressed in expensive black suits, their faces hard and emotionless, their movements sharp and efficient. They looked completely, utterly out of place in the small, rustic town. They flanked Nathan, not like friends, but like bodyguards, their eyes scanning the street with a professional, paranoid vigilance. Ty's heart began to pound a slow, heavy rhythm against his ribs. This was it. This was something different. This was a glimpse behind the curtain. He watched as the three men got into one of the black SUVs and drove out of town, not in the direction of Heartland or Nathan's own ranch, but east, towards Calgary. Ty's mind raced. This was his chance. He couldn't let it slip away. He ran to the bus station, his mind a blur of adrenaline and calculation. He knew the main highways, the routes a car like that would take. He bought a ticket for the next bus to Calgary, a desperate, long-shot gamble. An hour later, As his own bus was pulling into the main depot in the city, he saw it. The same black SUV, parked discreetly in the back lot of a high-end, exclusive-looking hotel. His gamble had paid off. He got off the bus, his own heart pounding with a mixture of terror and a fierce, exhilarating sense of purpose. He was a hunter, and he had just tracked his prey to its lair. He found a discreet vantage point in a small coffee shop across the street, a place that gave him a clear view of the hotel's private lounge, an exclusive, members-only establishment with large, tinted glass windows. And he waited. An hour later, he saw them. Nathan and the two suited men, seated in a quiet, secluded booth inside the lounge. The scene was a perfect picture of a high-stakes business meeting, and Ty, a ghost on the outside looking in, knew, with an absolute unshakable certainty, that the business they were discussing was the business of his own stolen life, and the future of the family he was so desperately trying to protect. He left the coffee shop and, with his heart in his throat, he found a way to get closer, a side entrance, an open window, a place where he could hear. The revelation he was about to receive was something he wasn't prepared for, but he knew he had to listen. Ty found a way in through a service entrance at the back of the hotel, a place of dumpsters and steaming vents. He moved like a shadow, his heart pounding, every sense on high alert. He was in enemy territory now. He made his way through a series of quiet, empty corridors, following the faint, muffled sound of voices, until he found a maintenance closet that shared a thin wall with the private lounge. He pressed his ear against the cool drywall, the voices on the other side suddenly becoming clear, and the world as he knew it, the world he was so desperately trying to piece back together, was about to be burned to the ground. The story shifts now to the other side of that wall, to the quiet, smoke-filled intimacy of the exclusive lounge. Nathan Price sat at the polished table, a glass of expensive scotch held loosely in his hand. He was the picture of calm, confident control. He was no longer the charming, friendly rancher from Hudson. He was a businessman, a predator, and he was closing a deal. "Mr. Harrison, so Nathan, your quarterly report was adequate, but adequate doesn't get us what we want. We've been funding your Good Neighbor project for 4 years now. That's a significant investment with very little return. Our shareholders are getting impatient. I need a real update. What is your timeline for delivering the asset?" Nathan took a slow, deliberate sip of his scotch. He looked at the two older, impeccably dressed oil executives, his expression one of cool, confident amusement.
"The timeline has been accelerated. There have been complications, but the plan is still on track. In fact, it's closer to success than it has ever been."
"Mr. Jennings, complications? We don't like complications, Nathan. Our agreement was based on a simple, stable scenario. A grieving widow, a lonely child, and you, the compassionate, supportive friend, stepping in to become the man of the house. What's changed?"
The ghost came back.
He said the words with a cold, flat finality, and the two executives straightened in their chairs, their expressions of bored impatience replaced by a sudden, sharp alarm. From the other side of the wall, Ty froze, his blood running cold. They were talking about him.
"The asset we had in Ontario has escaped.
He's back in Alberta.
In fact, he's the reason for our recent progress."
See.
Progress.
He then recounted a carefully edited, self-serving version of the past few weeks. He told them about Amy's vision, about his own calculated, angry outburst, and about their subsequent, emotional reconciliation. He painted himself as the hero of the story, the man who had weathered the storm of her grief and had come out on the other side, his position stronger than ever. And then he delivered the final triumphant piece of news.
"I met with her father, Tim Fleming, yesterday. I showed him the ring. He gave me his blessing. The engagement is now just a formality. I expect to propose within the month.
A slow, satisfied smile spread across his face.
Once I am her husband, once I am a legal partner in the estate, her guidance will be a simple matter. Jack Bartlett is old. His health is not what it used to be. The executorship of the trust will pass to Amy, and I will be there to help her manage her new and very significant financial responsibilities. She will sign whatever I tell her to sign."
From the darkness of the maintenance closet, Ty listened, his entire body trembling with a rage so pure, so absolute, that it was a miracle he didn't smash his way through the wall. This wasn't just a story about a lost love. This was a conspiracy, a cold, calculated, and deeply sinister plan to steal his family's home, their legacy. And the woman he loved was not a partner in this new life. She was a victim, a pawn in a game so dark and so twisted she couldn't even see the board. Mr. Harrison, a bold plan, but you seem confident.
I am. The final pieces are falling into place.
He raised his glass in a mock toast to the two men.
To Heartland, and to the vast, beautiful, and incredibly profitable reservoir of natural gas that lies just beneath it. It's been in the Bartlett family for 100 years. I think it's time it came home to a price.
The three men laughed, a low, cold, and triumphant sound that echoed in the quiet, smoke-filled room. They drank their expensive wine, three predators celebrating a victory they believed was already won, completely unaware of the ghost who was listening on the other side of the wall, a ghost who had just been given a reason to come back from the dead. Ty stood in the suffocating darkness of the maintenance closet, his body rigid, his knuckles pressed so hard against the thin drywall that his fingers had gone numb. The triumphant, cold laughter of the men on the other side of the wall was a roar in his ears, a sound that seemed to shake the very foundations of the building. He had come here searching for the truth, for a clue to his own lost past, and he had found it. But the truth was a million times darker, more twisted, and more sinister than anything he could have possibly imagined. This was not a story about a tragic accident. This was not a story about a simple, misguided rivalry over a woman's heart. This was a conspiracy. A cold, calculated, and deeply personal war that had been waged in the shadows for 4 long years. And the family he knew on a deep, instinctual level was his own, was not just a victim of a tragic loss, they were the targets. He felt a wave of pure, white-hot, and completely incandescent rage wash over him, so powerful it almost made him black out. The urge to smash his way through the wall, to burst into that room and wrap his hands around Nathan Price's throat, was a primal, almost irresistible force. He wanted to see the look on their faces, the shock, the terror, as the ghost they had created came back from the dead to exact his revenge. But another colder and more rational part of his mind, the part that had been honed by 2 years of survival in the wilderness of his own non-existence, held him back. He was one man. An anonymous, undocumented man with no resources and no allies. They were powerful, wealthy, and protected by a wall of money and influence. To confront them now in their own territory would be suicide. It would be a foolish, emotional, and ultimately futile act of self-destruction. He would be silenced for good this time, and his family, his Amy, would be left completely alone, completely unprotected, and at the mercy of the monster who was pretending to be her savior. He had to be smart. He had to be patient. He had to use their own arrogance, their own belief that he was a broken, forgotten man with no memory, against them. He stayed in the darkness of the closet, his breathing shallow, his entire being a single, focused point of listening. He heard them finish their drinks, their conversation turning to the mundane details of their stock portfolios and their weekend plans. He heard them stand up, the scrape of their expensive chairs on the floor. He heard them walk out of the lounge, their footsteps echoing on the marble floor of the hotel lobby. He waited until the last of their voices had faded, until the only sound was the frantic, panicked pounding of his own heart. He slowly, carefully opened the closet door and slipped out into the empty, silent corridor. He made his way back through the service entrance, his movements now a practiced, ghostly dance. He stepped out into the cool evening air of the Calgary street, the world around him, the ordinary, everyday life of the city, now seeming like a strange, elaborate illusion. The people passing by, laughing, talking on their phones, they were living in a different reality. They had no idea of the dark, secret war that was being waged just a few feet away from them, in the luxurious, soundproofed rooms of the city's elite. He began to walk, not back towards the bus station, but just walking. He needed to move. He needed to put as much distance as he could between himself and the scene of his terrible, world-altering revelation. He was no longer just a man searching for his own identity. He was a man who had just been given a new, urgent, and incredibly dangerous purpose. He was not just fighting for himself anymore. He was fighting for them. For Jack, for Lou, for Lindy, and for Amy. He was fighting for the family that he knew, with every fiber of his being, was his. He didn't know the full story. He didn't know the depth of their connection, the history they had shared, but he knew with a certainty that was as real and as solid as the pavement beneath his feet that he loved them and that he would do anything, absolutely anything, to protect them. His fear, the raw, personal terror of his own traumatic memories, was gone, burned away by the clean, righteous fire of his new resolve. He was no longer afraid for himself. He was afraid for them. And that fear was a powerful, galvanizing force. He walked for hours, his mind a cold, clear, and calculating machine. He was no longer just an investigator, he was a soldier, he was a protector, and he was planning his campaign. He knew he couldn't go to the police. He was an undocumented man with an impossible story. They would think he was insane. He knew he couldn't confront Nathan directly. That would be playing into his hands. He had to get to them. He had to get to Heartland. He had to find a way to warn them, to tell them the truth, to make them believe. He had to do it without revealing himself, without putting himself or them in any more danger. He finally stopped, his long, aimless walk having brought him to the edge of the city. He stood on a bridge, looking out at the endless, dark expanse of the Alberta prairie stretching out to the east. He was a lone, solitary figure, a man with no name, no resources, and no allies. And he was about to go to war with a powerful, wealthy, and completely ruthless enemy. The odds were impossible. The task was insurmountable. But as he stood there, the cool night wind on his face, he thought of her, Amy, the woman with the brilliant, loving smile. And he knew with a quiet, unshakable certainty that he would not fail. He had found his way back from the dead. He would find a way to do this. He would find a way to save them. He had to. The cold, hard reality of the conspiracy, the sheer, calculated evil of Nathan's long game, had settled in Ty's soul like a shard of ice. He had stood on that bridge overlooking the dark, sprawling expanse of the Alberta prairie, a lone, invisible man against the world, and he had felt a moment of profound, paralyzing despair. The enemy was a giant, a man of wealth, power, and influence, a man who had seamlessly, surgically inserted himself into the heart of Ty's own family. And he, Ty, was a ghost, a man with no name, no resources, and a past that was a weapon that could easily be used against him. The fight was not just uphill, it was a vertical cliff face, and he had no rope. But as he stood there, the cool night wind whipping at his worn jacket, a new and infinitely more powerful emotion began to burn through the cold despair. It was the memory of their faces. Amy's, so full of a sad, beautiful resilience, and Lindy's, a perfect, innocent, and trusting child. They were in a house with a monster, a smiling, charming predator, and they had no idea. The thought of their innocence, of their vulnerability, was a fire that burned away his own fear. He was not just fighting for himself, for his own stolen past. He was fighting for them, for their future, and that was a fight he would not lose. His new purpose was a tangible, physical thing, a source of strength that settled deep in his bones. He was no longer a victim. He was a protector. He turned his back on the dark, empty prairie and began the long walk back into the heart of the city, his mind now a cold, clear, and calculating machine. He needed a plan. He spent the next few days in a state of intense, focused, and almost feverish activity. He was a man on a mission, and that mission was simple. He had to find a way to warn them. He knew he couldn't just walk up to the Heartland ranch. He had seen the way Amy had looked at him on that street corner, the flicker of a dawning, terrified recognition. If he showed up on her doorstep now, a wild, bearded stranger with an insane, unbelievable story about her trusted friend, she would be terrified. And Nathan, the calm, calculating puppet master, would be there to protect her from him, to paint him as a dangerous, delusional drifter. He would lose her, and Lindy, for good, before he even had a chance to tell them the truth. He had to be smart. He had to be strategic. He had to find a way to get the message to them, to plant a seed of doubt about Nathan without ever revealing himself. He spent his days in the quiet, anonymous sanctuary of the Calgary Public Library, but he was no longer reading the history of the Bartlett family. He was reading their present. He used the library's computers to devour every piece of public information he could find about Nathan Price. He read about his successful ranching operation, about his family's long history in the valley, about his quiet, philanthropic contributions to the community. On the surface, the man was a saint, a pillar of the Hudson community. But Ty knew the truth, and he began to search for the cracks in the facade. He created a fake email address, a generic, untraceable account, and he began to write. The words were a torment, a difficult, painstaking process of trying to sound sane, of trying to convey an unbelievable truth in a way that just might, be believed. He wrote a dozen different drafts, each one a different approach. One was a direct, anonymous warning to Amy. Amy Fleming, you are in danger. The man you trust, Nathan Price, is not who he seems to be. He is lying to you. He wants your land. Do not trust him. He deleted it. It was too direct, too crazy. She would dismiss it as the ramblings of a lunatic. Another was a more cryptic message designed to pique her curiosity. Ask him about Ontario. Ask him about the 2 years after your husband died. He deleted that one too. It was too vague. It would give Nathan a chance to create a new lie, a plausible explanation that would only solidify her trust in him. He realized, with a growing sense of frustration, that he couldn't do this alone. He needed an ally, someone on the inside, someone who was respected, who was trusted, and who had the wisdom to see past Nathan's charming facade. And in his mind, there was only one person who fit that description. A man he only knew from photographs and stories, but a man whose quiet, steady strength seemed to emanate from every page he had read. A man whose own painful past had given him a keen, almost supernatural instinct for detecting a lie. He needed to get a message to Jack Bartlett. The plan was a desperate, long-shot gamble, but it was the only one he had. He wrote a new message, his words a careful, deliberate, and deeply honest plea. He didn't mention himself. He didn't mention Ty Borden. He just presented the cold, hard facts he had overheard. Mr. Bartlett, I am a stranger to you, but I am a friend to your family. I have come across some information that you need to know. Nathan Price is not the man he appears to be. He is in a business partnership with a major oil and gas corporation. Their goal is to gain control of the Heartland property to access the natural gas reserves that lie beneath it. His relationship with your granddaughter is a part of that plan. I know this sounds unbelievable, but please investigate for yourself. Check the land titles. Check his financial partners. The truth is there if you are willing to look for it. Please protect your family. He signed it simply, a friend. He printed the message, sealed it in a plain white envelope, and addressed it to Jack Bartlett, Heartland Ranch. He knew he couldn't mail it. A letter from Calgary would be too easily dismissed. He had to deliver it himself, to ensure it got into the right hands. The final act of the story was a mission of pure, adrenaline-fueled terror and resolve. He took the last of his money and bought a ticket on a late-night bus back to Hudson. He arrived in his old hometown in the dead of night, a ghost returning to a place that no longer knew him. He walked the long, dark, and familiar miles from the bus station to the turnoff for the Heartland Ranch. He crept up the long, gravel driveway, his heart pounding with every step, every rustle of leaves in the darkness a potential threat. He reached the main house, a dark, sleeping giant under the vast, starry sky. He slid the letter into the familiar, old-fashioned mailbox at the end of the driveway, his hand trembling. The message was delivered. The seed was planted. He had done all he could do for now. He turned and melted back into the darkness of the woods, his own future a complete unknown. He had just declared a silent, anonymous war on the most powerful man he had ever known, and he had no idea if the one person who could help him, the one person he was putting all of his faith in, would even believe him. The walk back to his hidden refuge in the woods was a journey through a landscape of ghosts. Every familiar shadow, every rustle of leaves in the darkness, seemed to whisper a warning. Ty moved through the night, the plain white envelope clutched in his hand like a talisman, his mind a razor-sharp point of focus. The man who had been a ghost, a drifter, a confused and broken victim, was gone. In his place was a soldier on a desperate, high-stakes mission. He knew the risks. He was an undocumented man with an impossible, unbelievable story. To approach the Heartland family directly, to try and warn them of the snake in their garden, was to risk everything. They would see a rough, bearded stranger, a man who had been living in the woods, and they would see a threat. And Nathan, the calm, charming, and deeply respected pillar of their community, would be there to protect them from him. He would be arrested, he would be deported, or worse, he would be silenced for good by the powerful, unseen forces that Nathan clearly had at his command. But the alternative to do nothing, to let this innocent, loving family walk blindly into the trap that had been so meticulously set for them, was not an option. It was a moral impossibility. The deep, instinctual love and protective rage he felt for them, for the woman and child whose faces were the only two fixed points in the chaotic, swirling cosmos of his own mind, was a force more powerful than his own fear for his safety. He had to act. He had to warn them. He reached his small, hidden hut by the river, the silent, secret sanctuary that had become his home. But he did not rest. He spent the last, dark hours before the dawn in a state of intense, focused preparation. He knew he could not just leave the letter in the mailbox. It was too impersonal, too easily dismissed as the ramblings of a crank. He had to get it into Jack Bartlett's hands. Directly. But how? His mind, sharpened by a lifetime of survival instincts he was only just beginning to rediscover, began to work the problem. He couldn't approach the house during the day. There were too many people, too many chances to be seen. It had to be at dawn, the time of ranchers. The time when the old patriarch would likely be the first one awake, the first one to head to the barn. The plan was a desperate high-risk gamble, but it was the only one he had. He would wait in the deep shadows of the tree line that bordered the main yard. He would watch for Jack, and when he saw his moment, when the old man was alone, he would have to take it. He would have to step out of the shadows, just for a second, to place the letter somewhere Jack couldn't possibly miss it, somewhere personal, somewhere that would signal its importance. The windshield of his truck, the handle of the barn door. As the first pale gray light of dawn began to seep into the eastern sky, he was in position. He was crouched in the familiar concealing darkness of the woods, the same spot from which he had first, heartbreakingly, seen his daughter just a few short weeks ago. He was a silent, watchful sentinel, his heart a steady, determined drum against his ribs. He watched as the lights in the Heartland house flickered on, one by one. A light in the kitchen. Then in the main living room, the house was waking up. His family was waking up. After what felt like an eternity, the back door opened. A figure emerged, a familiar, stoic silhouette against the warm, golden light of the kitchen. It was Jack. He was carrying a steaming mug of coffee just as Ty had imagined he would be. He stood on the porch for a long moment, surveying his kingdom, his land, the quiet, peaceful world that was under a silent, insidious siege. This was it. This was his moment. Ty's body was a coiled spring, ready to move. But just as he was about to break from the cover of the trees, a new and completely unexpected complication emerged. Another figure appeared in the kitchen doorway behind Jack. A woman, Amy. She was carrying a mug of her own, and she came to stand beside her grandfather, her own gaze sweeping over the peaceful, sleeping ranch. Ty froze, his heart in his throat. He couldn't move. He couldn't risk her seeing him. He was trapped. He watched as the father and granddaughter stood together, a quiet, comfortable silence between them. He saw Jack put a loving, protective arm around Amy's shoulders. He saw her lean her head against him, a gesture of pure, trusting love. The sight of them, so perfect, so peaceful, so completely and utterly unaware of the danger they were in, was a fresh, sharp twist of a knife in his gut. His beautiful, perfect, and tragically simple plan was in ruins. He had missed his window, and he knew with a sinking, terrible feeling that he had to retreat. He had to get back to the safety of the woods before the rest of the world woke up, before he was discovered. He had failed. He began to back away, his movements slow, silent, and full of a profound, bitter disappointment. He had been so close, but as he took his final backward glance at the house, a new and even more shocking figure appeared. A familiar dark blue truck, a truck he now knew all too well, was pulling up the long gravel driveway. It was Nathan, arriving for an early unannounced visit. Ty watched in a state of stunned, horrified disbelief as Nathan got out of the truck, a warm, charming smile on his face, a box of donuts in his hand, a perfect picture of the kind, thoughtful friend. He saw Amy's face light up with a surprised but genuine, happy smile. He saw her walk down the steps to greet him. He was not just an enemy, he was a welcome, trusted, and beloved member of their family. And Ty was the monster, lurking in the shadows. The world in that moment seemed to turn upside down. The lines between hero and villain, between protector and threat, were suddenly terrifyingly blurred. The episode ends with Ty, a lone, heartbroken figure in the deep, dark woods, watching the three people he was so desperately trying to protect share a warm, happy, and completely normal morning on the porch, a perfect family portrait that he was no longer a part of. The letter, the warning, the truth was still clutched uselessly in his hand. His mission had not just failed, it had been rendered completely and utterly impossible.